But I mean, people do overuse a lot of the terms that people were mentioning in it, and like the trying to bring it back to us. Like when Alice is like, mental health is important. I never told anyone, but I have body dysmorphia. And they're like, Alice, please. People are dead, Alice.
Yeah.
I don't know how to tell you this cannot be about you and your podcast. Hi, I'm Gabe.
And I'm Kat.
And we're the Ghouls next door. Or the bodies next door.
Bodies times 3.
Yes. We're the media literacy show from a horror lens. We explore the real life, historical, psychological influences behind our fears. And today we are talking about the Gen Z thriller Whodunit.
Yeah.
Bodies as part of our Teenagers Scare the Living Shit Out of Me series.
Yeah, and ironically, these are 20-somethings, but it's similar. It's similar emotion vibe. Young people, ow.
Young people scare the bejesus out of me.
Yeah. I don't know if they scare, they intimidate me. I'm like, you're just so cool. And I'm, no, just kidding. I don't know. You know, I'm just like, you're cool as heck.
I think it's the situations scare the bejesus out of me. And the toxic friendships scare me. Just like PTSD flashbacks to college or high school when you just had those flimsy friendships that weren't anything real. And you, like, everyone's fighting all the time and everything's fake and you just pretend.
You like each other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it hurts. It's just an ouch time. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in my section, but like, it's just so ouch. And like, from an empathy standpoint, as you said, like, I was similar. I was just like, oh, sweet baby. I've been there. I'm so sorry for you. I want you to be me now that doesn't feel that way anymore. And because it's a slasher, a lot of them don't get to, and that's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also just like privileged kids.
Yeah.
And just also the way that they grow, like how they were growing up. The world's just different. The world's different for them. And that is scary as well. I just think it's like, oh man, the generations to come baffle me. I don't know how the generation after Alpha, like what they're going to be like. It's kind of scary. Yeah.
Revolutionaries, I guess. It's like the vibe for a lot of the younger generation.
We'll
currently.
The fall of
capitalism.
It's a dream. Yeah. We're gonna be talking about Bodies, which is a whodunit film playing on like the game of like werewolf with real stakes, real people dying, and you're like, what's going on? I really enjoyed it the first time we watched it in theaters. Watched it with you and my friend Vicky, who is the only remaining friend from college from a very similar circle of toxic friends. Yeah. So to me, that was like really funny for us to both be there and be like, I remember
this.
Like right at the beginning, like they're talking, not anything about Alice, but Alice shows up and is like, what are you guys talking about? You're talking about me? And like it's that like anxiety of like, when you leave the room, you know that you are at risk of being the butt of the jokes or being talked about, because when other people aren't in the room, that's what they do. Yeah. So everyone's free game, you know, and it like just ups that like anxiety level of like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You hate me, don't you?
I don't, but like the friends affect that.
The perspective of that. Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we hop in? I'll talk about Bodies, and just about the being Gen Z and the interaction with the internet and a lot of the terminology that's used in the film, I think it's just like really brilliant. I have been like, I loved it as soon as I saw it. And I know some people like dismiss it really quickly. And I was like, no, you don't. You're not getting how brilliant it is. I really vibe with it. I will say, if you are in the midst of those friendships or it's a little too soon, it could be a little triggering. Ouch. So protect your peace. Don't watch it if it's going to upset you. But let me tell you what Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is about. So here's a synopsis. It is from 2022. I think it was like one of the first movies we saw in theaters after the pandemic. When a group of rich 20-somethings plan a hurricane party at a remote family mansion, a party game turns deadly. And it's directed by Helena Rain and has a wonderful cast of colorful young actors and old actors. Lee Pace, the oldest person on screen. Brilliant. So Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is a dark horror comedy that tests friendships and one's flimsy perception of self. It follows a group of wealthy 20-somethings who party in the face of destruction.
It's also
I will say, as
it was giving like hedonism and the end of the world vibes too. Just fun.
Yeah, it's very Mask of the Red Death.
Yeah.
Right? Like chaos outside and we're partying it up in our mansion that has way too many rooms and just like the few handful of us. Like, absolutely. And that's kind of the point as well, right? So under the influence of many narcotics, lingering resentment, and tense friendship politics, the party turns deadly after a murder mystery game titled Bodies, Bodies, Bodies ends in someone's real death. And it's like, uh-oh, now we have a real murderer. Also, who was the murderer in the game? That scene where they're like trying to decide who's the killer. Like, we've played Werewolf a number of times, and I always find that fun because we always know when you're the murderer, when you're the werewolf, you get so red and you won't look at anyone in the eye. And you're like, what? No.
What do you mean? It's not me.
So good. And I'm very much a deflector. Like, when he says a good defense is a good offense or whatever, the best defense is good offense, it was like, that's me always. I'm like, right away, I'm like, look how guilty everybody else is, and then I start the
I'm so mad at it. It's fun.
It's a very tense game, but I think it's fun. So tensions and paranoia quickly escalate, leading to more violence and chaos. The friends' relationships are tested as their secrets and betrayals come to light. With mounting suspicion and a growing body count, the line between the game and reality blurs, forcing the characters to confront their true natures and the dangers of their toxic dynamics. And the film is a brilliant form of horror satire, putting Gen Z culture, relationships, and ideologies under the microscope and in the hot seat, and something that I find very fun. Like, I mean, I'd love for people to make fun of millennials. Like, we get a bad rap all the time, and we were just like, we're just here, you know? Like, we're not even doing anything. And that's like, this series, Teenagers Scared of the Living Shit Out of Me, just talk about young people in horror and like talking about the culture and like the societal woes. Could not find a millennial horror version. So please, if you know, like, we cover like 3 Gen Z and 1 Gen X. So if you know of a millennial film that's not like Scream, which was more about the slashers than it was about the teens, I would love for you to tell me, and I want to watch it. Like, specifically talking about like the culture of what millennials are, and I'd also want to know what our culture is. I don't know. So there are many things I appreciate about Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. From the first watch, I was hooked by its brilliant humor and sharp satire. I enjoyed the film's critical analysis of youthful toxicity, which is evergreen. That happens in all youth. It's perfect for a fun group viewing where you can laugh together at the sad, twisted young characters as they face the consequences of their action. It's very engaging in that way. You're just like, oh, everything is so sad and strong. And like, I remember just feeling that awkward and uncomfortable and uncertain. And then like big things are pushed upon that is like, oh. So despite its comical take on the generation's flippant attitude toward life and existence, the film handles the fragility of Gen Z with care and sensitivity. I think it did a very authentic take of like what people do in those situations. And especially like this generation, like it was very thought through, like every part of it. Like Kat was talking about before, just even like the clothing is intentional about what everybody is wearing, certain colors that are referenced and representing who people are and what they're doing. Like, I love an intentional film.
Yeah.
And this being directed by a woman who is Gen X, talking about Gen Z, like it could have went a different way. It could have gone
Absolutely.
into like ranting, like look at these stupid kids
these days,
these days narratives, and it didn't go there. I never felt that way. I felt like it's like, it is so hard to be you.
Yeah,
Like,
it was empathetic towards them. It was like, dang, you really were handed a short stick, and it's hard. We get it. Like, it makes fun of them, but like respectfully.
yeah,
like empathetically.
Yeah, from a place of care. Like, I know it hurts, buddy. I'm so sorry that it hurts you. But that's life sometimes, right? So the film highlights Gen Z's performative culture, a heavy social weight that can impede growth or true compassion, which Kat and I had a whole discussion about, because I think like performity can have a really negative connotation to it, which is totally valid. Right? Like if you're performing allyship, or a lot of things that we cover on this show tends to be like bad performances of things. But that's not really the case. That like what I was thinking is more of like, there are roles that they have had to learn to play. It's like masking, essentially. Like there's specific masks that they have to wear.
Vibe.
Yeah. Excellent. So the performity of the characters stems from the weight of social conformities that they're expected to navigate. Gen Z, being the first generation fully online, have had their entire lives broadcast, captured, and performed on the internet. We have like Gen Alpha and the ones to come that are like even worse off for that. Like we have some really scary like influencer moms out there that are like all kinds of scandals occurring, right? And there's a lot of ethic conversations about putting young people who can't really consent to being on the internet that way. But I mean, like every part of like Gen Z's life is online to some degree. Like we even have like internet ultrasounds. So even before you get here, like people are some digitized. Yeah. We had like a brief, like we were in that like movement too. So we still have an attachment, like an authentic attachment to analog. That like to them is like science fiction in a way. And they adhere to their own set of social rules, which when combined with technology, emotional distance, and significant societal issues often leads to the performative allyship and care. Like there's a lot that they have to juggle. And so then it does become a performance because it's too much to keep up with, right? And it's driven by the social expectations rather than genuine feelings. Like I just feel like they don't have the time to develop genuine feelings because like internet culture is fast moving, right? We talk about like our attention span is not there. It really is that like we have to keep moving and things change. Like I've watched Doja Cat get canceled in the morning all the way into the point where she was uncanceled and celebrated by the evening on Twitter in the Wayback Machine. She's been canceled like 3 other times since then. But like in the span of a few hours, her career was over and then it was lauded. It was like anything can happen, right? And they've seen this happen their whole lives. And they're like, everybody knows everything about you and also nothing about you because it's all fake. So, you know, despite their wealth and privilege, the characters are still young and often shallow, reflecting the influencer generation that is perpetually online and unable to fully disconnect from their social media personas. Because it's almost a bit it's an extension of self that they don't always turn off because the cameras are always there. Yeah. So in the opening scene, we have Sophie and her paramour B that are embracing in an up close and very long makeout session. Lots of tongue. It's like like the first scene is like, okay, gotcha. And it's this makeout session that like, you know, they you know, uncouple and then they're like lounging there in love, giving each other love eyes. And Sophie confesses her love for B, her girlfriend of just 6 weeks. And I was like, oh, that's just being the lesbian. Which is like the joke, a part of that too, right? But I think it's also like the fast pace of like youth. Like you think you're in love immediately because you don't know what that is. So the scene eventually devolves into disconnected moments with both girls glued to their screens. Like, it's really funny. They're like both at their phones and their sound is on, which is, I think, is insanity. I was like, that's a psychopath. It's like,
no, it's a thing. People do that. Some people do like it.
I
also hate it, but
like my brain.
Yeah.
I'll accidentally have it turn on, and I know, like, a second I hear like a click, I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's also like, okay, so you know how like millennials hate phone calls, but Gen Z don't like phone calls, but they do like FaceTime.
Yeah, they like video calls.
Yeah, so it's just like, you know, it's like this whole difference between our generations.
Yeah,
of like sound
100%.
And, like, yeah,
I'm like, no, that's invasive.
Yeah, stop yelling at me.
I'm sorry that I'm here, and I'm trying not to bring any attention to myself.
Yeah.
And then Gen Z is like, we're here, the party started. And I'm like, oh my God, I love that for you. I really wish I could exist. I wish I could exist as loudly and proudly as you all.
Yeah.
It's like, I love that so much for you, and I'm just like so envious. So I found Kat found a lovely article because I was like trying to get my words together, and then I was trying to convince Kat why I put this on the list and why I was like, we need, like, I've been asking to cover Bodies since we saw it in some shape or form, and like it just never made the cut. And I was like, let me tell you why it's so like what it's doing and why it's just like transforming my mind. And then in my explaining it to them, they found this great article that's literally just confirming everything I said. And I was like, oh, thank God I'm not crazy.
Validation.
Putting stuff into things that aren't here, which is like, I do that. That's what our show is. But in an article on New York Times, feels like even more valid, titled Bodies, and Gen Z's Struggle to Connect IRL, Amanda Sandberg, who plays Sophie, shares on that disconnect, saying, Sophie is expecting B to perform this intense level of vulnerability, even though she perhaps has not earned it. And I think that's something that we expect now of everyone, because we all perform vulnerability on the internet, right? So like people get there faster and are expecting it faster because we need to get to the point. No one could just like let them cook. It's not how it's working.
Because then you get like that gratification of the relationship doing what you needed it to do. You have that kind of like permanence that the world just does not provide given to you, and it's an unfair expectation, but it is valid.
It's how hard. It works. And then she also thinks like, I'm giving it to you, and she feels like the bigger person because she's like, you don't have to say it right now, but she definitely feels like I'm putting more into this relationship, so I have the upper hand. For sure.
What we find out later is like, you were guilty.
That's what it was. You felt stress. Yeah. There is a strong codependency of this generation with the internet. Like their existence, like so much of their existence and perception of self is interpreted through the lens of that tiny screen. So when the power is out and they're left with only themselves as entertainment, things get really scary and treacherous. And in that New York Times article, there's a quote from the director, Lena, who says, when the Wi-Fi goes out, it's like they lose oxygen. And I was like, that felt like the panic. I was like, I feel that panic. Like, I'll read a book or whatever, but that's not the level of party that they're at, you know?
Yeah.
They're not like, time to go take a nap.
Yeah. And it's like that isolation that makes it so, like, the pandemic had such an impact on that. And it's crazy how much, because it literally feels like oxygen to them. Because that's like their only path to other humans and not being alone. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think the film offers an honest portrayal of a generation that is non-confrontational and deeply entrenched in internet culture. Like everything is like a microaggression. Because they can't be direct. They can't be like, because then they risk being the villain. And that's such an important, that's like the big thing is perception. It's like insane. So it really exaggerates the flippancy and nihilistic characteristics of today's youth in a like tongue-in-cheek manner, almost as if they are mocking themselves. Like it's so exaggerated. Like no one's talking precisely like this. Like you're silencing me. And like, but I mean, people do overuse a lot of the terms that people were mentioning in it, and like the trying to bring it back to us. Like when Alice is like, mental health is important. I never told anyone, but I have body dysmorphia. And they're like, Alice, please. People are dead, Alice.
Yeah.
don't know how to tell you this cannot be about you and your podcast.
Yeah.
But much of their interaction revolves around trying to be politically correct and avoid being labeled as wrong because of that, right? So for this generation who has seen the results of a social witch hunt, right, the damage that can be done if you are canceled, it can seem even more terrifying than death, right?
Yep.
Like that is a heavier, like we talked about your legacy and how important that is, right? So the characters are constantly wielding weaponizing language to portray themselves as innocent or the victims in the situation, while simultaneously disregarding the humanity of their supposed friends. The whole thing is like, no, I'm in trouble. I'm the main character of the story.
They all have protagonist itis.
Yeah, protagonitis. Absolutely. Everyone knows that everyone else is fake as well. So it shows how delicate the balance is, that they are constantly walking a line, aware of the problems of the world, trying not to fall victim to those things, and just trying to live their lives. Like it's a lot to juggle. And they're young, so everything feels like the biggest emotion. Like they're like 20 somethings, early 20s. They're like they just got here. This is like an assassination nation in which she's like, don't be mad at me. I just got here. That's them. Right. And consider TikTok, right? If your algorithm is doing a good job, then you can be inundated with the horrors and nightmares of the travesties that are happening in Palestine right now in one short 30-second clip before scrolling and given instant access to a silly video of someone's dog deeming today a no bones day. Like in one moment, ripped apart. In the next, we're giggling, right? Like that, like constant, like manipulation of our emotions is damaging in the long run. Like it's just like a crazy, people weren't made to do that. Like, we don't have the capacity to like be unharmed by, you know, that change, the drastic change.
It removes our anger from it too. Like it stifles it in a way. Like the one activist I follow is Matu Gwendolyn. Like her whole thing that she talks about is that literally like how we receive information and then like are dissociated from the emotion attached to it immediately because we're fed something totally different. It really messes with our like cognitive development and our ability to like think about things and feel those emotions authentically. So it's like legit. You are correct, ultimately. Yeah, like
it like doesn't disconnect, but it kind of desensitizes us in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to move forward.
Yeah.
And so you don't like actually have to deal with the issue. You just keep going. So that fluidity and constant switching of emotions can have damage. And we can in one moment feel the full weight of trauma and then in the next laugh. And the film embodies that experience because in the face of tragedy, literal death, not bodies, pretend death, you're laying on the floor, literal death, these people can quickly shift, disassociating to protect themselves. Stenberg expands on this cognitive dissonance in that article, saying the point is not to say that Gen Z is not intelligent or sophisticated, but rather to provide a commentary for how absurd the circumstances are. And following up with that, director Rain continues, we can totally live in the face of death and still speak about things that are so unimportant, but so big to us. I find that funny and tragic, of course, at the same time. All right. And that's what they're doing. Because in one moment, someone is dead. And then the next, they're like, but me. Like, don't forget, I'm here and I'm hurting. It's about me. Your boyfriends are dead, but it's fine. And they have to be on their best behavior, which means that they don't feel safe or comfortable being open, honest, or vulnerable with each other, which is like the biggest thing about the friendship and relationships that are here. So Bodies highlights the challenge of maintaining authenticity in an age of performative social interactions. And the director explains that I think we live in a time where we're all very narcissistic because we're constantly on camera. Right now, we're constantly aware of how we look, and that is, of course, unprecedented, right? Normally, that was just actors or musicians, and now it's all of us, especially these kids who are wealthy. Like they probably had access to like the phones and that stuff way before normal people, right?
Yeah.
We have watched many social movements grow, starting at a place of strength and retribution, right? So for this generation to see the hashtag Me Too movement blossom, amplifying the voices of women everywhere, revealing a shocking number of most women having suffered some form of sexual abuse or inappropriate behavior in life, in the workplace, literally all aspects of our existence. And then to see just recently, Harvey Weinstein, a large proponent of this harm, have his sex crime conviction overturned, right? It gives whiplash and it's deflating, right? So for Gen Z to have watched and championed healing and growth with acknowledging phrases like gaslight, trigger, toxic, and silencing, and then see them evaporate into irony, into being overused, and that like the persistence of this language results in its meaninglessness. We devalue those because it's getting twisted, it's being reworked into what it becomes, right?
Co-opted.
Yes. It just like, just misused, and then it becomes less heavy and impactful when it's actually brought up. When the character Emma says that her boyfriend David is gaslighting her, she's like, he's always gaslighting her. He, essentially responds that that's meaningless. He's like, you just learned some words on the internet and you just paired it out. You've never had an original thought in your life, which is like an insane thing to say to your partner. And he's just like, be more original. Like, he's just like, your mouth opens and the internet comes out of it. And he's not wrong. Like, they're all that though, like him included. Like his response to her, like when he's just like, what's next? You're going to say that I'm like a soldier for like a foot soldier for the white supremacy. And I was like, you kind of are, buddy. And like, just because the terms and stuff has been misused and kind of like minimized doesn't mean that the action and the things that had initially instigated those responses aren't also as true. It's just like, maybe we need different words for them. Like, the film is laced with these words and phrases that are pathetically weaponized. I'm an ally. Alice responds to when Sophie brings up, honestly, again, playing victim, but it's not a bad point where she's like, okay, when the black girl has a coke problem, like, we need to get her into rehab. But my best friend, who was a white man, has an incredibly bad coke problem. Alice over here is on so many drugs and just miscellaneous things. They're okay. And she's like, okay, first, I'm an ally, because like, that's what's scary. It's not like, what's scary is you dubbing me like the problem. Not that like I am an enabler, that we have been doing lines this whole time and you told us that you were sober. And we're supposed to care about you. Like, it's insane. They say you trigger me, you're silencing me. Again, Alice, she's stole the show. Every time she opened her mouth, you're literally silencing me.
She's so funny.
He's a Libra moon. That says a lot.
It like paved the way for bottoms. For
I
like,
love Rachel.
So good.
Don't do anything bad, Rachel, please. God, oh my gosh. Those are just some few of the instances that bring really big laughs. It's so fun. It is easy to laugh at this group of friends as they struggle to hold on to the idea of victimhood, fighting not for their lives, but their perceived identity. Like, when Jordan shoots Alice, and Alice is like, you literally shot me. And she's like, no, I didn't. And she's like, holding the gun. She's like, you shot me with that gun in your hand. And she's like, no, I didn't. I was like, your parents are upper middle class. There's so much where I'm like, she was just like going, and it doesn't feel like a lecture. It feels like we're all in on the joke, including the people that we're making fun of. And that feels way more authentic than like, Assassination Nation being like, don't sexualize young people. And I was like, but what do you do? But you are. This is like actually not sexualizing the children. And it's like just talking about how hard it is to be them and exist. But like the fact that the real fight isn't even like, I'm worried that someone might kill me. It always comes back around to like, I can't trust any of you because you're all fake. And I know that because our friendships are all fake and I'm the victim. Anytime someone dies, it comes right back around to that, because it is far more deadly to be labeled as a gaslighter than it is to literally die. Right? Death is temporary, but being canceled is infinite.
Yep.
Right? That is your legacy. That is forever. But one thing I did want to mention, because I like to add on a little tangent. Since we covered Assassination Nation in our last episode, I wanted to make space to discuss some real issues that happen outside of the film, like with the reception of this film. So firstly, this film is about young people, but not teens. And so any sexual activity is allowed as long as it's consensual, right? And there wasn't like the sexual activity we saw was girlfriends in love making out, or partner, like a bunch of partners making out and grinding on each other and dancing with each other. None of it was gratuitous. So I just want to put that out there first. Like already,
it all served a purpose. Yeah, it was a part of the plot. Like, but like intentionally so, and not to be disrespectful to the actors or the story.
Yeah, not like in the same breath that you're trying to like say something. So when we covered Assassination Nation, my biggest critique was the over-sexualization of the teen girls. It was purportedly empowering. Nudity isn't inherently sexual, is a true statement, but the nudity or framing of those girls was intentionally sexual. Like, and absolutely, you can't argue with me. I won't hear you. Bodies features some sexual situations, right? But every bit was important to the story and was not overdone in any way. I never felt like, this. Like, no shots lingered on parts of bodies, right? Yeah. Like, there's no angles that was like, let me get their butt in the frame. Like, it wasn't anime framing. It
wasn't fan service.
It was not fan service, which is like the big thing, right? There's plenty of opportunities where they could have done that and they didn't. And I do think like having a woman director at the helm is an influence of that. And just like that's not what the story was supposed to be about, right?
Yeah.
The actress who plays Sophie, Amanda Stenberg, experienced the impact of our toxic sexualizing culture firsthand, because this is what Assassination Nation was trying to tell us exists, right? In their film, and this is what's happening in real life for a film that didn't do that. So in a review of the film, critic Lena Wilson wrote that the film doubles as a 95-minute advertisement for cleavage, which, mind you, is incredibly false. I rewatched it and I was looking and I was like, even like Alice, who's wearing like a crocheted top.
Yeah.
And you could see sometimes side boob, maybe, but they're literally just existing. Like, every single character is just existing. There was never a part where I felt like the things that they were wearing or the things that they were doing or the way that they were shot was over-sexualized in any way. So nudity isn't inherently sexual. In fact, Sophie is never nude. She spends the entire film in a tank top. If you're watching, I'm wearing her literal same outfit. Minus, like, she has like a jacket over it. Right? But Stenberg, in response to this review, DMs Wilson saying, "Your review was great. Maybe if you gotten your eyes off of my tits, you would have watched the movie." Like, it's not us. It's definitely you. Because if you were watching my tits, that's because you wanted to look at my tits. And I do want to note that both of these people are lesbians. So Amanda and Wilson, who is the reviewer. So it was like, fam? What? So this led to Wilson responding and then blocking her, which is super petty AF. So there was more to the issue with Wilson complaining that she can't even critique a movie anymore. You can, but it should be valid. Like, you can critique a movie, and if you said that about Assassination Nation, I'd be like, 100% you're correct. It was 2.5 hours of child's butt. I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, this different. So Stenberg gave a longer response that ended with, "The intention of why I said that, and this is my experience as an actress, it's quite surprising. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised, I guess, at this point. The amount of commentary that I've received on my boobs is so extreme, and this has happened since I was a teenager. I could literally be wearing a t-shirt, and just because of the size of my boobs, there will be some sort of sexualization or commentary on my chest. In this movie, I'm wearing a tank top, and I know that when I'm wearing a tank top, the result is there's going to be some cleavage. Because," and this is Gabe speaking, like, just having larger breasts, you wear a shirt and they're there. I'm sorry, buddy, I can't do anything about them. they're there, right? And she says, because I have boobs. That's where the cleavage comes from. So I knew this comment was mostly directed towards me, and I think Lena was trying to make a commentary about A24 sexualizing me, sexualizing my body, exploiting young women in order to sensationalize them, in order to make their media more popular. And I understand the angle. I can tell you that I wore this tank top in this movie because me and the costume designer thought that it fit the character well. And so I do get tired of people talking about my chest. There seems to be a lot of unwarranted conversations about my chest that kind of baffles me.
Yeah.
And like, Kat found a great article that talked about all the intentionality from everybody's wardrobe. And Amanda's is very intentional too. Like, the level of what she's wearing is every single thing was thought through. And none of the reasoning was, we want to see tits, right? So see, Levinson, Mr. Levinson, if you're watching this, haven't canceled us yet. You don't need to go out of your way to sexualize young femme bodies to make the point that people see them as sexual objects, because they're going to do that all on their own anyway.
Yeah.
So that's the hope and dreams that we have for the country. But yeah, that's my section about.
Because it's, you don't have to dramatize the sexualization because people are just going to inherently do it. Like, it's just a part of what society is. And to make that point, as you said, Gabe, you don't need to do what Levinson did, which is like, look at them. And it's like, they already do. This by existing. They're like, why don't you change everything about yourself, hide yourself entirely? Like,
like, you're so close to the point. You were so close. Just watch this now. And then realize, like, you don't have to be there in that space. Like, as she did, like, Lena did such a great job of taking care of these girls, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree. It was just like a good film. And I liked it the first time, I definitely did, but like I liked it so much more the second time, because once you know what happens, it just changes how you view it. It can be like a character study instead of like an, oh my God, what is happening? You know,
who is it? Who did it?
Yeah. Cause like once you know, it's like, oh, okay, I don't have to focus on the anxiety of that. I can focus on like, what are these characters like? What are they doing? You know? So yeah, it's just so much better. It wasn't better necessarily, but I just enjoyed the intent and meaning of it more the second time than I did the first time. So it's just like a cool film ultimately. So the title of my section is, I don't know about you, but feeling 22 sucks. Being in your 20s sucks. Like, least favorite time of existence, not gonna lie. And I don't know if it's like, it's not something universally like Gen Z. Like, that period of life is a volatile time. It just sucks. Like, especially when you're entering into a world that like hates you. You know what I mean? Like, you just don't, no one wants you to succeed in this world. And when you reach the point where you're like, I'm an adult now and the world is on fire, that just sucks even more. And it's like, you don't have, I'm going to talk about this whole thing. It stresses me out ultimately. And this film, I feel like, just does it so well, where you're just like, oh yeah, ow. So as I said, this film was even better the second watch, which is something that the ghouls don't always get to experience. While watching and knowing the ending allowed for so much more focus to be on the characters instead of the events. So if you do watch, highly recommend. Highly recommend watching it twice. So you have more space to witness more. And in this watch through, what stood out to me most was a deeply emotional characters floundering through their early 20s, which in some ways was a reflection of my own 20-something experience. I definitely it's a horrible time. The characters on screen, as absurd and selfish as they can be, were at the very least, from an empathy standpoint, compelling. And I related to their pain and fear of not being accepted by their peers and fear surrounding not being able to be their authentic selves. Our experiences in life have been very different, as I am for sure a millennial and also never existed in that income bracket.
And never probably will.
Yeah, no, it's not happening. I'm like 31 now and not even close. So it's just not happening. It's okay. I'm happy. So that's cool. These kids weren't. And they're very wealthy. And I'm going to get into that because that's just the thing. But insecurity and not being yourself, that is something I understand well. So what I related to is that look of desperation and terror in their eyes as they delivered slivers of themselves, seeing pieces of their masks fall for just a second, and the intense worry that that second would be the reason their friends dropped them forever. It is a very much what it is like to live in a neurotypical oppressive society that expects you to play a part in a very specific way as an exchange rate for love. And for
companionship.
Gen Z, yeah, like to have people in your life, like love is the exchange rate. Our companionship is the exchange rate for you, like burying yourself when you're this age. Unfortunately,
we can only love you if you're like this.
Yeah, and it's just reinforced by society and our parents and all this. It's like a whole thing. So for Gen Z, their part to play is always saying the right thing in the right way and not allowing themselves to ever fail, which stifles exponentially their ability to grow and heal as people because they're detached from themselves, and it sucks. So the magnifying glass of social media has them always scared that they're going to be the sacrifice made to the sun if they move the wrong way or out of line. Imagining their ants in that scenario. So there's also something to be said about the inauthentic toxicity of these interactions, relationships, and how that branches off into, as Gabe was talking about, like enabling behavior and self-harm. Something that like Gen Z, unfortunately, has a lot of. Self-harm and enabling behavior is something that, like, with drug use, etc., like there are coping mechanisms that are just like inherently pushed upon that age group that are super toxic, especially if you're like not allowing yourself to heal or be direct in your communication methods and grow. So this method of communication that the characters used was very neurotypical, which Gabe alluded to. And in that, every sentence had subtext and every sentence was like, ow. So in the film, honesty was only delivered to hurt as a backed into a corner response to feeling threatened, not as like a, hey friend, I care about you. Let me tell you how I actually feel about this. It was like, oh, you maybe see me? That is a threat. I must destroy you first.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a window into how neurotypical culture even hurts neurotypicals. Because I think there were characters that were maybe coded as neurodivergent in this, but it was not said. So I'm not going to put that on them. And they were mimicking and acting within neurotypical society. So it hurts them too. Similar to how misogyny also hurts men.
Yeah.
As dedicated to identity and self-expression as Gen Zers are, our teen years and our early 20s seem to be mutually painful and scary in this way. I think because of this, I just felt a deep level of sympathy towards these characters and was not rooting for their downfall, even when their downfall was inevitable. And at their core, they were all just scared and lonely kids that needed to be protected and weren't, either by their families and society, the impending collapse of that society, or even each other. And the most painful curse that Gen Z seems to be forced to bear is that, as Gabe discussed, even their vulnerability is expected to be polished and rehearsed or a performance. And as someone painfully aware of the psychological harm associated with masking, I could see the pain in all of their eyes, the constant fear that filled them after saying anything. Using drugs and alcohol is the only release and coping skill that they have, because dissociative behavior is the only safety they've ever been taught by social media.
It's just Alice saying, are you guys talking about me? It's like panic. You hear the panic in her voice, and they have not been talking about her, and it's literally been a few minutes.
Yeah. And it's just like, I don't know.
Poor baby.
In therapy, they're like, you lean towards dissociative behavior. And I was like, yeah. And then I thought about Gen Z, and I was like, wow, yeah, no. All they have is their phones. It's like the only window into, like, they get left alone a lot. And the only way for them to deal with life and the horribleness of the world is that they have to dissociate, and they use social media and other things to do that. And it's like harmful as heck to their bodies and minds. Insecurity and non-confrontational communication styles are not unique to Gen Z. We are just more connected to this generation because they're magnifying glasses on them. There is just more evidence of their existence, as Gabe was saying. Their ultrasounds are on the internet. We won't really know the full impact of what the internet has done to them until they reach older ages, in my opinion. I think they're still in the middle of it, and we won't really see what happens till, like, everyone stopped talking about millennials once we calm down. So the same will happen with them.
Once we got too old for them to complain that we were like children.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a new thread.
So yeah, they're just, that time of life is volatile. And another piece of social relationships that this film does a great job playing upon is that our adolescent years, nothing is more important than fitting in, finding connections, and building friendships. And humans generally crave social acceptance as a means of survival, because our brains know we have higher chances of surviving with more bodies present.
More bodies.
Yeah, more bodies. In our youth, these connections, unfortunately, are significantly more circumstantial than intentional. Like, as he was saying with, like, college, like, that's who's around you. You couldn't help but meet those people. And like, sometimes that's a good time. Sometimes it's a stressful time. We become friends with who is in proximity and who has similarities to us, be them economic or interest-based. And those connections are made and sometimes maintained well beyond their ideal shelf life. And the internet has ways of expanding that scope or isolating it even more. And what we see in Bodies is a group of friends who don't particularly like each other. And it's like played upon so well because they're not honest with each other, and they maintain these friendships because it's comfortable. Like, because they're not calling each other out. They don't have to change in these friendships. They don't have to be better in these friendships. They can just be who they are-ish, while simultaneously like never actually being themselves. So it's circumstantial, it's easier. So like in the film, they even call out an instance with Emma and Pete Davidson's character saying like they should have broken up years ago, and she just didn't because she was like, this is easier, I'm just gonna stay with him.
Yeah, I like having the idea of a boyfriend and not having to try.
Yeah. So what we see in this friend group is how comfort prioritizing and confrontation avoiding relationships as gays are inherently enabling. When you avoid confrontation, accountability, and honesty, you stifle growth. And that's like the biggest issue with Gen Z. And I hope they find it in their 30s like we did. Because like when you don't have a space to fail, you cannot like heal and grow. And you like eventually need that. And if you don't have that in your friend groups, there's going to be a lot of like hatred towards yourself and self-harm that takes place. So this film does an amazing job showcasing the deep flaws of this friend group and exacerbating them in a situation of crisis. But what is unique about Gen Z's experience is that they never actually given safe place. So previous generations could flounder without permanent character assassinations. Gen Z has been aware of the threat of being canceled, as Gabe said. There's never an illusion of privacy. Privacy is dead, and we just need to accept it. And also, like, something that, like, really stands out is, like, they witness how much we just don't have reformative justice in this country.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, that is the thing, is, like, they see the horrors and it gets called out and nothing gets done. So it doesn't even feel, like, worth bringing up.
Yeah, and it's, like, accountability can look like a death sentence, so we must skirt it and avoid it at all costs. Income bracket and the impact of social media is also a thing. I found like a really interesting mental health social media impact article. And basically similar to like what we found on the Ghouls with how wealth can negatively impact our like emotional capacity. There's something isolating about wealth, especially in countries like America, where it's almost inherently made from the suffering of someone else. So there's this threshold where it can be like a good thing and where it can be bad. But when we're 20 something years old and in that extremely volatile emotional space, the wealth can even have like further damages and isolation on us. So essentially, this is relevant to Bodies, because the characters are all wealthy except for one. And in the article titled Social Media and Mental Health, the Impact on Gen Z, they unpack a global survey on the McKinsey Health Institute where they examine the complex relationship between social media usage and mental health among Gen Z. The survey was conducted across 26 countries with over 42,000, I know numbers, respondents. And the survey found that while social media offers some positive aspects such as self-expression and social connectivity, it also contributes to negative impacts like poor body image and fear of missing out. And what we see is that essentially its impact is more like the poor mental health aspect of it has bigger impacts on femme presenting Gen Zers than mass presenting. And what was interesting, this is like a random fun fact, is that millennials actually use the social media more than Gen Z.
I believe that.
But essentially, despite the negative impacts, more than 50% of respondents from all generations saw it as something like we need, because we're all addicted to it. It's a positive space for social expression and connectivity. That's where
some of us get our information.
Yeah. But essentially, in high-income countries, they found that the negative impacts were more pronounced. So while in countries like China, Egypt, and Nigeria, Gen Z reported higher and like better mental health, we see it was like significantly worse in high-income countries like America. So we see this reflected in Bodies, and all these friends being deeply unhappy, both with themselves and each other. And then there's also like the way the pandemic really influenced them. So essentially, this is like my opinion, but like when inundated with how awful society can be, jumping to murder is not a far stretch. they knew any of their friends could be murderers because like they grew up on podcasts and true crime and documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone could be a murderer. The country is a murderer. Like there's nothing positive.
And they know everyone is lying. They know everyone.
Yeah.
No one has showed their true face. So I couldn't tell you. Like the fact that they always bring up like, how long have you known what's his name? And it's like, that's not really, because how well do you know these people? Does time really say that you know that more about them?
No.
No.
But what's interesting about this is that there's something, placing this on Gen Z was just like the best thing they could have done because of just how it played out. It was just more fun.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, Gabe. I think it would be cool if we had a millennial horror movie that was just like really reflecting on what millennials are. I don't know if we'll get it or even if it exists, but I really like that they put it on Gen Z because there's something, the pandemic just did something very specific to that age group that is unique. And how we like unpack that during how social isolation impacts that specific like foundational years that we discussed in our Pearl episode. This is very similar to how Gen Z is experiencing like social connections, but Pearl didn't have social media and Gen Z does. And that's like kind of how it's a little different, but it impacts the brain in a very similar way. So there's always the distance that Gen Z experiences because most of their connection to each other was through their phones, maintained through a screen. Additionally, every step of the way of their upbringing, they had windows into things previous generations did not see, a globalization and impending doom that previous generations only had access to if they were physically present. And in a journal article titled Generation Z Values in Media from Influencers to Be Real, Between Visibility and Authenticity by Simona Tarochi, they discuss the relevance of values in today's fragile societies influenced by globalization and the COVID pandemic. So today, however, the issues of values assumes renewed importance in a society where the certainties of modernity appear to have crumbled, giving way to situations of great fragility and existential uncertainty. So kind of calling that Gen Z see the great fragility of the world, and it's fragile in a way that hasn't been seen in a really long time.
Or beneficial.
Yeah. So these conditions have altered social relationships and the role of digital platforms and self-representation and social interaction. Living through the pandemic and witnessing how little people cared for each other and people's capacity for harm, it makes the jump that like someone here could be a murderer easier to land on. The bringing up of podcasting and how this large section of podcasting dedicated to true crime documentaries, as well as showcasing what human beings are capable of, especially unknown ones, as you said. They were like, immediately were like, we don't know him. And it's like, they didn't know each other. But the death of Greg is a great example of this, where his death was a result of him being an unknown and very little else. Like they were just like, he's a problem. It also showcases how humans can view morality as subjective and not objective, like murder being okay, when they thought this man was a murderer, and then demonized immediately once they were like, actually, he probably wasn't. So the journal continues with the study of Gen Z values and states about participants that participants also describe the society as multiculturally complex, yet rife with inequities and contradictions. Some see it as highly individualistic, with a lack of sense of community, where the focus is overwhelmingly on the individual. The pandemic exacerbated the sense of individualism as university was experienced individually, I study. But now it seems like a community has reformed. They also discuss a materialistic society where personal gain, money, career, and self-presentation take precedence over often leading to selfishness, linking this back to like the inability for Gen Z to experience true vulnerability and therefore being detached from their own growth. The article states, according to other interviewees, in a society of prejudice where people often stop at their preconceived notions about others, it's a society where anything less than perfect is immediately judged. So like they specifically did a study on like Italy, which is interesting because like Bodies is in America, but there was a lot of similarities, honestly, as like a societal critique, where they're basically like a lot of the kids felt like even when they were being nice to people, if they stopped being nice to people, like there was one story where like they helped this kid buy lunch. And they had like this, they kept doing it, not because they wanted to keep buying this kid lunch. Like it started from a place of care. And then the only reason they kept buying this kid lunch is because they were so terrified that if they did, they would be viewed negatively. and like the people around them would cancel them. Like that was like literally, and like the deep anxiety of that. And they viewed social connections not as like community, but as like chains.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could not escape the perceptions of other people, and then like that was more damaging than like actual pain or harm. So that, and then also like how the pandemic really made everything very like like American inherently is very individualistic, but like the pandemic very much made it so that like all they had is themselves. That's all they had to like protect themselves. And what they had is on the internet is this detached version of themselves making connections because they had no other access to the world. So that just like foundationally changed how they connect with other people in a stressful way that was like deeply harmful to an entire generation of people. So
yeah, I think like it really has me thinking about Greg in this point, because he was so out of his element. Not just like, there's a lot of communication things that gets harped on, like when they are just continually messing with him. But I also think the weight, because he's an older millennial too, like he's like 40s, and so like even farther than like I would like to think I could at least kind of understand. Like I'm definitely not cool in the eyes of Gen Z, but I would understand what's going on, and I would not be so easily the butt of the jokes. But
yeah,
he like, when he is like, when they're like circling him and stuff, like he just doesn't even comprehend the capacity that they have for violence, and the fear that they have. Like it takes so long for him to register that he's in danger.
Yeah.
And like, even when he's like reacting and like trying to play back to them and they're like screaming terrified, he just like does not get it for like too long that he's in danger.
And yeah, they like perceive him as a threat at a level that like just does not, like, it's so stressful. And I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, like millennials and Gen Z are definitely nihilistic. We're very often just like, why would you try to keep going like in an apocalypse? And I think Gen Alpha is kind of like, we're here to watch the world burn, because it is going to burn. Like, and it kind of passes the like, we'll just go in the night to, we're gonna thrive in the midst of the flames. Like, I don't even know. It's like, it's such a crazy perception. So I'd love to see
what other choice do they have?
Exactly. I can't wait to see whatever Gen Alpha like horror movie study comes out.
Yeah,
you know, and what that says about them. And maybe someone can make a millennial. I think it's too late, and I don't know what they would say. I just think like we were just really sad. Like we just lived in like really horrifying times, but everything was quiet and everything was like make pretend. And so I don't really know. Yeah, everything was just weird. I think the best you could do is get like the time period of like when the internet was scary because like Megan is missing, you know, like that kind of horror movie where it's like, oh, you were sex trafficked because of you talked to someone on AIM.
Oh my God.
That's the, you know, like that's the, I feel like what they would happen. I don't know.
It follows millennial.
Yeah, but it's not a critique on millennials.
Yeah, that's true.
It just has millennials in it. That's what, that is the thing I want to say for people who are like maybe yelling about films that just have millennials in them and it's horror. That's not what I'm asking for. There's plenty of that. I'm thinking like the only critique or conversation about millennial teen young person culture that I could find really was like Mean Girls, right? I want that, but horror. Right? Like I want Bodies, 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 millennials. I want Talk to Me, millennials. I want Heathers, millennials. Jawbreaker, millennials. Like, I don't know how else to explain this to you. Like, there's a gap. There's like many years gap that is not representing me and my lived experience and how horrific it was. So give me some of that. Give me actually teenagers scared the living shit out of me. My Chemical Romance. Right? Like, give me some
Wake me up.
I'm just saying. So that is our episode on Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. It's a great film. I really hope that you watch it if you can. And like Kat said, watching it twice is a great idea as well, just because like once you know what happens. I remember the ending, I was cackling. I was like, that is the best ending. Like, that was the best way for this to end, because it really confirms, and I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but it confirms, like,
Yeah.
and just like doubles down on the toxicity of all these relationships and friendships, that people were like, I believe my friends are capable of murder because I don't know who they are. And there's no part, like, if I was in the midst of that, I could never like point to Kat and be like, you possibly are a murderer and aren't telling me. There's no part of me that would believe that. As fun as I can like have playing werewolf with you, being like, I know when you're a liar, even if you were getting red, and I would be like, they're just very scared and nervous in the situation with me. There's no one single one of my friends that I could ever honestly believe. And that's because as an older person, you start like prioritizing friendships.
Yeah, you just have like a different way of developing those relationships that is less circumstantial and more intentional. Just through like, you're like, I can't keep going if I feel this awful. I need to not feel this awful. So we need to find people who don't make me feel this awful.
Exactly.
And I want that for Gen Z in their mid to late 20s, similar to how we figured it out. But like, hopefully,
oh my God,
they get that. I want that so that they can heal and grow and feel less chaotic and sad.
Yes. Yeah. They're like, yes, I feel so much for them. And I hope, like, if you're a Gen Z person, you watch this movie, tell us how you felt about it. Was it triggering? Do you feel like, ugh? Because, like, I can see, like, a Gen Z person feeling the same way that, like, millennials have always felt about, like, boomers and all them, and Gen X and all them, like, looking down on millennials and thinking we're stupid and being, like, and blaming us for all the world's problems. Like, you know, oh, give everyone a trophy and now look. It's like, you did that. Like, you raised us. You're the problem.
You're critiquing yourself. Why are you saying anything about
just
it?
Come out here, Athena from a forehead fully formed, making these decisions. You did this. So
we just got here. Exactly.
We just got here. Right? Don't take it out on us. So, I think, like, I would like to hear from a Gen Z, and if they're like, it was annoying because you're just teasing us and I didn't think it was funny. And I think it's super valid. You're allowed to feel that way. And I apologize if you did feel that way, honestly. But I think like maybe you also felt seen. Have you had those toxic relationships? Have you had those moments
where
you
still in them? And it's like, how do I get out of it? You know?
This could be a wake-up call. If you feel the need, like if you leave a room and your friends are in that room, do you feel this sense that they're talking about you in a negative way? That might be a sign.
Yeah.
That might be a sign to not be in those friendships anymore. And just be trusting and honest. And that is a learned thing. Absolutely. So it's okay if you're not there yet. So give yourself time, give yourself space, give yourself peace, right? Protect your peace and give yourself grace for making mistakes and going through those hard things. And don't kill people about it. Maybe we ask more questions.
Yeah, that would have been good. Ask more questions, I think, would have been smart in the entirety of the film.
I get it, though. If I watched a friend of mine die inexplicably, and I was also on lots of drugs.
I think the drugs played a very important part in the plot. If they weren't on drugs, maybe they would have calmed down a little bit.
I think it exacerbated a lot of the issues. I think that it was always going to be a bad time. Maybe less deaths. Maybe people would be making more smarter decisions. Like Alice, baby girl, you shouldn't have been making those decisions. There's a time and a place to have these feelings.
Oh, and it's not Emma. Oh my god.
Or Emma. Oh my god. Yes.
Emma makes me sad.
Emma's very sad.
I thought this is what you wanted.
And and then for her to be like, you think everyone's in love with you. I was like, oh my god, I also feel that. It was like, it's not that I think it that, it's that I wish that. Yeah. It's different. It's like,
I just want to be loved and accepted.
I need to be loved and no one's loving me the right way. And so I just hope more people do, because then maybe the little bits I get will equal enough.
Yeah.
It's just such a sad thing to happen. So, don't get married.
Don't eat your kids. Or your kids will be scary.
Your kids will be the next generation of whatever's after Alpha, and that's so scary. I don't know what that is. I'm like so nervous. All right. Bye.
Bye.